Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Adoption Happy Hour brought to you by NAAP. We are the National Association of Adoptees and Parents, where it is our mission to unify the adoption community and elevate our diverse voices by promoting dialogue, understanding, and healing through education, awareness, and connections. I'm Marcie Keithley, co-founder and vice president of NAAP, along with fellow board member Beth Story in the Zoom room, who will be helping out. Jennifer's out ill this evening, so she won't be joining us. But we're just excited to have so many of you join this evening. If you haven't already, please feel free to use the chat room and say hello to Nadine. Let her know where you're from and how you identify in the constellation. So before we get started, we do have some housekeeping items. We do want to remind everyone that this is a public meeting with no guarantee that information or identity is confidential. Portions of this event are recorded and may be shared on our private happy hour group on Facebook, as well as our YouTube channel. I want to take a moment to remind you, if you haven't joined us on Adoption Happy Hour on Facebook, that's where Nadine's replay will be if you want to go back and watch it, or for those that have registered and are not going to be with us this evening. Make sure you reach out to us there. Please remain on mute, raise your hand on screen or the virtual hand to be recognized. You're welcome to post your questions or comments in the chat room. If you are experiencing a serious mental health event or suicidal thought, please contact a licensed professional or the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline by dialing 988.
Okay, we do have a few announcements. Okay, this is our regular programming here at NAAP. Happy Hour is the first and third Friday of each month, and we have a whole host of different kinds of guests that we feature, and stories and organizations and all of that. So you will want to keep up with that. Our support groups are an important part of what we do. And we have Putting Yourself Together After Reunion with Dr. Joyce, usually the second Tuesday night of the month, occasionally the third, but that will be coming up here in about 10 days. And we just talk all things reunion with Dr. Joyce, who just has a fabulous wealth of information and experience to share with us. And then we have First Families, Birth Parents Journeying Together, and that is hosted by Amy Seek and Amber Jimerson. And they have been having a lot of really impactful meetings. They've been doing writing prompts and just really sharing and connecting with each other. And that group meets the second Thursday of each month, and that is next week. And I know that that is already being advertised, and you can register for that. And then our last group meets the fourth Thursday of the month, and that is facilitated by Danielle Gaudet. Self-Love Essentials for the Adoption Constellation, all about mindful exercises and meditation and getting in touch with ourselves to facilitate healing in our lives. And then also big news around here, and some of you may not be very familiar with this, so I'm going to talk a little bit more about it than sometimes. But we are gearing up for Untangling Our Roots, round 2, if you will. We had Untangling Our Roots in 2023 in Louisville, and in 2024, we will be in Denver. And we partner with an organization called Right to Know. And what this really important event does is it brings 3 communities together to amplify our voices. Those communities are adoption, assisted reproduction, and NPE, which stands for non-parental experience. Non-parental experience. Finding out dad's not your dad is generally what that one is about. So we unite these 3 communities for this really fabulous event. It's going to be in April in Denver. And for those of you who know Brian Stanton, you are thrilled to know that Brian Stanton is going to be the MC for our entire weekend. Well, actually, the very first night we have someone different, but Brian is going to be leading us through this incredible weekend, and we are so excited to have him. Our very first event Okay, I gotta get this to advance. There we go. Our very first event on the Thursday evening will be an open mic time. And this was so popular last year that we now made it 2 hours. And it's going to be hosted by the host of Ancestry.comedy's Misfit Variety Show. She has this show that she does various places. And she came to us and said, I want to be a part of your open mic night. So we're really excited that that's how this event is going to kick off. One of the many, many things that will be going on is this fabulous plenary speaker panel. And each community will be represented by one of these persons on this panel, and they will be sharing their really unique experiences and stories with us. So you will definitely want to save that date, and you will want to be looking at purchasing a ticket because early bird tickets are on sale. We've sold about a half of our 100. So after those 100 are gone, the price will go up. So you will want to check out untanglingourroots.org, and I will put that in the chat later, and follow Untangling Our Roots on Facebook as well, because this is really going to be an epic event that you won't want to miss. That's it for announcements.
Okay. All right, so we're ready to go ahead. We're going to start off with an introduction with Nadean by looking at her book trailer. And so, Beth, if you want to go ahead and pull that up. And we'll
I will bring it up, and unfortunately, it seems that I'm the only one who can hear the sound, but you're going to get to see it. And then, of course, you'll get to hear from Nadean. So let me find that.
So we need better leverage for the reform that we need. So my idea is we can create a new global around climate environment. Scientists tell us there's a set of countries, primarily tropical countries, where climate costs are 3 to 4 times greater.
Okay, are we ready for Nadean to begin?
Mary, can you put your audio on, Mary Gurley? Can you put silence the audio? Because I think we're getting reverb there.
These frontline climate problems.
There we go.
Got it.
I'm sorry you
That's
missed
okay.
the music because it was really moving. But anyway.
Okay. Beth, we have the pictures ready to be pulled up?
Yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead and begin, and I'll bring them up when you get to that part.
Okay. Hold on just one second. Okay, Nadean, welcome to Adoption Happy Hour. We're so excited to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm pleased to be here. My story.
Great. And the book is No Stone Unturned, a riveting memoir by an exquisite writer. This is a remarkable journey to identity, and I haven't quite finished the book, but I've read most of it. This is a page turner, and you'll definitely want to get a copy. I think we're going to give away a copy at the end, aren't we? We talked about that. So we'll give away an autographed copy of this book for those of you that have attended this evening. So we're going to just dig right in, Nadean. I want you to go ahead. We're going to just start about how your adoption came about, and let's just take it from there.
Okay, a little history will help. Between 1945 and 1973, about 350,000 unmarried Canadian mothers were coerced or forced into giving their babies up for adoption. Many babies, like me, were illegally given away like a puppy at the pound for a nominal donation to the church. On December 18th, 1952, I became one of those babies. 6 days after my birth, my mother signed documents relinquishing all rights to me and instructed Mother Superior to find adoptive parents. She then boarded an afternoon train in Blind River, Ontario, Canada, on Christmas Eve and left me behind at the hospital. Sid and Rita Russell lived in Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario, Canada. They were in their 30s, a young, attractive, accomplished couple. Rita was Hollywood beautiful.
She's gorgeous.
They owned a bowling alley and a convenience store, Russell's Grocery. They lived in the old stone house, which is now a museum in Sault Ste. Marie, and drove a big yellow Packard. They were happy, but desperate for a child. Rita had grown up on her family's 160-acre farm outside of Blind River, Ontario, which was 84 miles from Sault Ste. Marie. On January the 11th, 1953, while driving home from a family gathering at the farm, Rita turned to Sid in the car and said, "Sid, I want to go to the hospital and pick up the baby girl." Neil, Rita's brother, and his wife Annette were in the back seat of the car. Annette shared this story with me in 2013. Neil and Annette were shocked as they had no idea what Rita was talking about. Sid said, "Rita, let's stop the car and talk about this. You have breast cancer and have had surgery and radium treatments. We don't know what is going to happen. How can we take a chance with a baby?" Rita replied, "Sid, I really want a baby. I am strong. I believe that if God gives this baby to us to raise, then he will let me live long enough to raise it." She begged him to return to the hospital. Sid said, "Let's flip a coin. Heads, we go back to the hospital. Tails, we drive on to Sault Ste. Marie." Rita happily agreed. Sid flipped the coin. It was heads, so they turned the car around and drove back to the hospital. In the 2 seconds it took, my life's trajectory was determined by the toss of a coin. Half an hour after Sid and Rita entered St. Joseph's Hospital, they emerged with a baby in Rita's arms. Rita said to Neil and Annette, who were in shock, "This is our baby girl." Annette couldn't believe the hospital would let them just take a baby. As they drove away, Annette saw a woman standing by the glass doors watching their departure. It was not my mother, as 3 weeks had passed since my birth. But the nuns did this to make the adoptive parents think they had seen the mother, and in some way she had given her silent consent to them taking her child. St. Joseph's Hospital in Blind River was known to have a ward on the 3rd floor for unwed mothers. So many women from towns in Ontario went to Blind River, lived with the nuns at the convent, and signed papers relinquishing custody of their babies after their birth. Sadly, 2 years later, on Valentine's Day, Rita passed away from breast cancer. She was only 36 years old. I lost 2 mothers in 2 years. In the last year of her life, Rita feared for my future. Sid, who loved Rita passionately, had started drinking heavily. So Rita created a will leaving me to her mother, Mary Felland. I went from living in a beautiful house in the city to life on a remote farm with no electricity or indoor plumbing, lit by kerosene lamps at night. My grandmother and my great uncle, that photograph was taken in 1952, the year I was born. That was how they transported themselves to and from town in a horse-drawn wagon. And that's me and my great uncle Manon. He made a little axe for me to pretend I was cutting wood like he did. And that is a portrait of the farm, a painting of the farm that was commissioned by my aunt. I was embraced and surrounded by a loving French-Canadian family, and my grandmother became my mother. After Rita died, Mary took me back to the hospital to meet Mother Superior. She asked if Mother could provide any information on my birth mother. Mother Superior said that my mother was from Yugoslavia, that she had traveled to the hospital to have the baby and give it up for adoption, as her mother was coming over from the old country, and she didn't want her mother to know she had a child. Mother Superior said she'd returned to the town where she lived previously in Northern Ontario.
What started you on your search for your birth parents, Nadine?
I started my search in 1973 as I was desperate to know my history, my ancestry, and why my mother had left me at a hospital. My search was made more difficult because I had never been legally adopted. So when the province of Ontario changed its law in 2008, enabling legally adopted persons access to their original birth records, that access was denied to me. I wrote to numerous children's aid societies asking if they'd handle my adoption. All replied in the negative.
Well, that must have been disappointing and frustrating both at the same time. What action did you take?
I hired an attorney to file a complaint against the province of Ontario and St. Joseph's Hospital, all to no avail. The hospital was very accommodating initially. They actually spoke to my cousin Heather, and they were willing to assist with my search until the administrator researched my birth. When she discovered that my birth had never been registered with the town hall as required by law, and that the Children's Aid Society had not been called in to oversee my adoption, all support from the hospital stopped, and they hired an attorney who advised that the hospital could not share any details of my birth as I had not been legally adopted. The administrator, however, in error, sent a copy of my birth mother's one-page doctor chart with her name redacted, indicating that she'd given birth to a healthy female child on December 18th and had been discharged from the hospital on December 24th. When I used this document to approach the hospital once again, they said they could not be assured that the woman giving birth that day and I were related. An administrator from the Privacy Commission, who realized that my transfer to Rita and Sid was not legal, instructed my attorney to withdraw my complaint to the province, or she would seal my records forever and I would never have access to them. My attorney advised me to withdraw, which I did. Another official I spoke to at the Privacy Commission, who was willing to chat with me, said nothing had been done correctly after my birth and that I had an actionable case against St. Joseph's Hospital. She said they had no record of my birth until I completed a birth record inquiry at the Registrar General's office in 1973. She said, by supplying the only parental names and birth information that I knew of, I unknowingly registered my own birth with Sid and Rita as my parents. She said the hospital should have called in the Children's Aid Society to handle my adoption. Nothing was done according to the law. But I was not about to sue the hospital, which had gone through so many ownership changes since my birth. I was blocked at every turn.
What did you do at that point then?
I then turned to DNA, which was my last hope. DNA indicated that I was of Croatian heritage. A volunteer search angel by the name of Olivia, who is a DNA genetic genealogist, saw one of my posts on a Canadian adoption website and offered to help with my search. Olivia had me test on both Ancestry and 23andMe. We wrote to third and fourth cousins on both sites, asking for their assistance with their family trees, trying to drill down to first cousins. We also asked for help on Croatian and Slovenian Facebook groups. Olivia had successfully helped 5 men in the United States search for their birth parents. I was her first female client. Olivia had never handled a case where the adoption was illegal, so it was even more challenging for her. Olivia uploaded my DNA to GEDmatch, a site for adoptees. Olivia is amazing. She drew up spreadsheets of DNA connections, family surnames, and towns in which they were born, comparing centimorgans, trying to get closer to a first cousin. She and I worked on this project from February 2017 through August 2017. We sent messages to more than 150 cousins. Olivia said to me, Nadine, so many of your cousins are moved by your story. When I talk to them, they refer to the baby, to you, and of wanting to help. You might not have parents at the moment, but you have this amazing growing village of cousins who care so much and are doing their utmost to help us. In all my years helping adoptees, I have never seen such an outpouring of care and compassion. They want the baby to find her mother. They want you to succeed.
So was the DNA research successful?
Astoundingly, we found my birth father, Victor, in June 2017. I never expected to find him. I thought we would be lucky to find my mother alive and well. His daughter, Vivian, had tested on Ancestry. Olivia called and said, a woman living near Toronto has just been linked to you on Ancestry, and it indicates a first cousin relationship. What should we do? I told Olivia, I could not make that call. Olivia said she'd made such phone calls many times, was comfortable with it, and so called Vivian and her mother, Irene, advising them of the first cousin relationship and asking for additional information as to how I might be related. They had no idea. I called Irene subsequently, and when she said that Victor had immigrated to the same town as my mother, I knew Ancestry was wrong and that Victor must be my father. We just had to prove it. Victor passed away in 2000, so we were not able to meet. Olivia did further research on Ancestry and discovered that Vivian and I shared 1,298 centimorgans over 44 segments, which indicated a half-sibling relationship. Although Vivian and Irene were initially receptive to Olivia and to me, once we established that Victor was my father, they ceased communication. I then hired a detective, Clarissa, in the town that Victor resided in when he first went to Canada. Clarissa had also been adopted. We were not successful initially, but unbeknownst to her or to me, when she reached out to a female friend, her best friend in the Croatian community, that friend turned out to be my birth mother's niece, my first cousin. We just didn't realize that at the time, that her aunt was my mother. We were so close.
And then what did you do next?
My husband, Bill, and I became amateur detectives. Armed with the knowledge of Victor's residence in Ontario, we flew to the town and started researching all things Croatian, organizations, church, town hall. We met with Clarissa, who was delightful, my detective, who was so disappointed that she was unable to help us. We spent 2 days at the town library researching surnames linked to me back in 1952 and 1953. We sent all the information to Olivia, who was waiting patiently all day long. She was trying to make further connections. We found the house Victor lived in and St. Joseph's Hospital, where my mother worked in 1952, but we did not find her. There were a few St. Joseph's Hospital run by the nuns throughout Ontario. So we left the town after 2 days and flew to Vermont.
Did you think the search was over then? Did you get discouraged?
I was very discouraged, but decided to give it one last shot. While in the town, I'd connected with an elderly Croatian gentleman, Leonard, who knew my father but did not know my story. They had spent a couple years together before Victor moved to Toronto, and although Victor was older, he'd taken care of Leonard. Leonard said Victor was very, very handsome. Can we have pictures of Victor, please? He was gorgeous.
Ooh.
I know, absolutely.
Yeah.
I know. And if we take the next photograph, please, because the next photograph shows the plane that he flew during World War II. Victor was a Croatian pilot, a World War II ace. Get my notes here. That was the plane, the actual plane that he flew in World War II. And Leonard said, all the girls love Victor. So I took a chance. I called Leonard, told him my story, and asked for his help to find my mother. I told him it was my last wish in life. And at that point, it really was. I told Leonard, if God takes me after this, I will be okay as long as I find her before I pass. I was desperate to find her. And I said, if I find her and she does not wish to have a relationship, it will be okay. I just want to know the story. And Leonard was very moved and said he would make inquiries. So he approached Dolores and Gerald Radicic. Gerald had owned a ladies' clothing store in the 1950s and would know of a woman who had left the town for 4 or 5 months and returned. When Leonard told them about Victor, Dolores said she did not know of Victor. And Gerald looked at her in disbelief and said, Dolores, you dated Victor for months. The only reason you didn't marry him was that he had a wife still in Croatia. And then Gerald proceeded to give my mother's name to Leonard. But it did not mean anything to Leonard, as it was her original name in Yugoslavia. And the nuns had given her a new first name, and she had married. So Leonard did not know who she was. But he texted the information to me, and I sent it to Olivia. Timing is everything. A year later, Gerald passed away. If we had waited, we would never have made this connection. Olivia looked in her DNA and she said, we had nothing to match with my mother in the DNA. That Sunday, after Mass at the Croatian church, Leonard met with a coffee group of 8 people. They did not know each other intimately. Leonard related my story and asked if anyone in the group knew of a woman who had left the town for a few months and then returned, that I had visited the town 2 weeks previously and had asked for his help. My mother was in the coffee group. She said nothing, returned home after the meeting, and called her youngest daughter, Christy, saying, come over now, I have something to tell you. My mother told Christy and her 2 sisters all about me. Christy contacted me via email, which she found on the Canadian adoption website, as Olivia had, and we started planning. Before meeting them, I asked that my mother and Christy take a DNA test with 23, and I did not want to invest so much emotionally and then find out we were not related. They took the test. The results took 4 weeks. Our relationship was confirmed on my mother's birthday. When I called her and told her the results, she said, I knew we would match. Initially, she wanted to meet with me alone in a hotel. Bill and I would fly to the town. As we were in flight, I received a text from Christy. My mother had decided to meet us at the airport. After we landed and were walking through the airport, we approached an opaque glass door. As the glass door opened, we saw a pretty petite lady in a lovely suit sitting on a bench holding her small handbag. A very handsome young man was sitting beside her. As we walked toward her, Bill stopped, and the young man rose from the bench and moved away. She stood, and as I approached her, a small smile played on her lips, and she looked at me anxiously. When I reached her, I put my arms around her, held her tightly to my chest, and whispered the words I'd longed to say for so many years. Hello, Mom. It was magical.
Those moments are so precious, those first exchange of words. What did you say after the meeting?
My mother's 92 and wishes to remain anonymous, so I cannot share her identity. She told my sisters that she always worried that I might be poor and abused. She told me that she had no choice in 1952. She was a recent immigrant to Canada, spoke very little English, and had no way to care for an infant. She met my father at a Croatian event, and they had only spent a month together. They were so happy to have survived the war. They were young, and she had little life experience. The nuns told her that after leaving the baby, she should move to another town. But if she returned to her former residence, she should tell no one about the baby. She should forget about it. She should take the secret to her grave. If she was lonely, she should get a puppy. I told her I was in no position to judge her. She did what any single woman without family or financial support would have done at that time. I told her, you made the right decision. I had a wonderful mother in my grandmother, and I had a good life. The following day, we drove around the town in 2 cars, connecting ourselves. Bill was with my brother-in-law. That handsome young gentleman turned out to be my brother-in-law, and all the women were in the other car. I wanted to see where they had lived, where my sisters had gone to school, the Croatian and Slovenian festivals they'd marched in. And at one point during the drive, my mother said, please stop here. Do you see that window on the 2nd floor facing the street? After I returned from Blind River, your father came to visit me. I was in my room. The landlady knocked and said a gentleman was asking to see me. I looked out the window and saw it was Victor. He was standing on the stoop outside. It was January and very cold. I walked downstairs and opened the door. We looked at one another, but there was nothing to say. He was still married with a wife and son in Croatia. He had shown his son's photo to me when we were together. I had not told him about the pregnancy. There was no future for us. So I turned around, closed the door, and walked back upstairs. When I looked out the window, he was gone. It was the last time I would ever see him. I never told him about you. There was palpable silence in both cars. We were all struck by the profound sadness in her retelling of their last encounter.
I just lost my signal. Can you hear me okay now?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so let's talk about your memoir next. It's No Stone Unturned, A Remarkable Journey to Identity. So let's talk about what the book's about and what would you like your readers to take away from your story?
Well, my story is more Hollywood than Hollywood, as I tell people, even more so as it is true. It will grab the reader and take him or her on an unbelievable roller coaster ride. The story's main plot is of the search for my mother, but there are many subplots throughout. There are many highs and lows and much unbelievable action. I wrote No Stone Unturned to inspire the reader to find faith, hope, and the courage to persevere despite the odds, to continue to dream, to never, ever give up.
And it's been said that your story contains all the elements for a great movie. And you have a goal of creating a TV series. But why a TV series? Tell us more about that.
I'm exploring the transformation of my memoir into a TV series as the protagonist experiences so many unbelievable challenges that a movie would not be able to incorporate all the dramatic events that shape her character and lead to its miraculous outcome. It contains all the elements for a TV series: real life drama, pain, suspense, romance, royalty, politics, and more. One reviewer wrote that after reading Nadean's story, I shall now look upon my life as a glass filled to the brim. My book was selected by Tailflick, an LA production company, as a Tailflick pick. Uri Singer, who's CEO at Tailflick, suggested that I contact actress agents personally to pitch the story. He said it has enormous potential, so that's my next goal.
So if you had the choice right now to tell your 18-year-old self something, what would you tell your 18-year-old self?
I would say do not be defined by your challenges. No matter what trials are presented to you, continue to dream, never surrender, and never give up. Do not just survive, but thrive each and every day. Make an impactful life.
And then what piece of advice would you, from your experiences, would you like to share with all of your viewers?
I would like to share that life is never perfect, but one can experience many perfectly wonderful moments. Life can be hard, and we need to work through the challenges that are presented to us. Continue to pursue your goals no matter how insurmountable they might seem, as dreams really do come true. You might experience a miraculous outcome that you could never have envisioned. I was able to experience many perfectly wonderful moments with family and friends, and they were worth all the effort.
So again, I'm going to hold up your book cover. If everybody see this, okay? That's a beautiful book cover.
Well, the picture on that cover is me. When I was 2.5, Rita had passed in February, and I was now living on the farm with my grandmother. And that was that day was the last time I'd ever see Sid for many years. He arrived that day and he brought that little sailor suit that I am wearing and held me over the sink on the farm with the handle to pump water from the well in, and brought a toothbrush, which I'm holding, and toothpaste, and showed me how to brush my teeth and said, you must do that every day. And then he left and I did not see him for many years.
You know, one thing about your story, there's so many moving parts. There's so many, it's dramatic, it's funny, it's heartbreaking, but to stay on track, your adoption never got finalized.
Right.
That whole birth certificate was a huge mess. And I think there's so many people here with us this evening that have ran into the same situation where they had difficulty getting their original birth certificates. You want to weigh in on that a little bit more?
In terms of, well, I was stopped. I will never get my original birth certificate. By when I went to the Registrar General's office in 1973 and told them I had been adopted, I had heard that if you applied for the long form birth certificate, it would reveal the name of your birth mother. And that was my goal, but I didn't want to tell them that. So I said, I'd like to fill out a form to get my original birth certificate. They said, okay, put the information that you know here. And they said, you have to put down parents. I said, but I don't have any parents. I was adopted. I don't know what to put down. They said, well, put the parents who raised you. I said, but that will be inaccurate. Those are not my natural parents. They raised me. They said, well, put that information down anyway, and any names that you know. So I did. And they said, come back in 10 days. So when I went back in 10 days, I received what is called a delayed statement of birth, indicating Sid and Rita are now my parents. And when I received it, I said, this is not correct. It's inaccurate. They're not my parents. But of course, I didn't understand the law back then. And I didn't understand about delayed statements of birth or anything. You know, back in 1973, we didn't have a lot of information to go on. And they weren't allowing you to access your original birth records. And it was only when Ontario changed the law in 2008 that I had the opportunity to apply for my original birth record. But because I was not legally adopted, even if I didn't, well, if I'd been properly legally adopted, they would have given it to me. But because I was illegally given away, I did not have access to that birth record.
So earlier you said, and you used this verbiage, you said unknowingly, you unknowingly
Registered my own birth.
Registered for your own birth certificate.
The hospital was supposed to register my birth at the town hall. They didn't. They were supposed to call in the Children's Aid to supervise an adoption, to visit Sid and Rita Russell, make sure that they were able to raise me. And they would have realized right away that Rita was sick with cancer and that I would not have many years with her. I might not have many years with her. Back in the 1950s, that was a very, very difficult diagnosis. But they were not called in. And I just fell through the cracks. I don't know why Mother Superior never called in the Children's Aid Society. I think too, my mother worked in another hospital, St. Joseph's Hospital, in the town where she was from. And so the nuns there had sent her to Blind River to have the child. And so everyone knew her. They knew that she was an employee of this hospital. She'd gone to another hospital to give up the child. And I think perhaps in some way they were protecting her identity. Because in those days, and there were no services in the Canadian government to provide financial services or support of any kind. There were no social services. So she didn't have anything to fall back on as an unwed mother. There was no one to daycare to help raise the child, especially an infant. She could not have done it back in 1952.
Yeah, we've often talked about that here on Happy Hour about moms and what the society was like. You know, women couldn't get credit. They couldn't have their own bank accounts. They couldn't get their own apartments. They literally had no choice. There was nothing that they could do but surrender their babies.
Right.
Okay, so let's back to your book. Okay, would you like to share with our viewers where they can purchase the book and your contact information if someone wanted to reach out to you via email, your contact information?
Yeah, you can purchase the book on Amazon. There are 108, I think, reviews. They're all 5- and 4-star reviews. And some of them are quite long and quite emotionally charged. There, people who read the book have been very touched by it, and it's very gratifying to me. So Amazon, and you can contact me. My website is www.nadianstone.com. You can send me messages through there, email me, and I will respond. And my personal email is Nadean rs@aol.com. I'm still on AOL. I have a Gmail, but I still use AOL.
We converted it. Is there, I want to ask you, is there a second book? Do you have any future works?
Not at this time, but if I was going to write another book, it would be called Secrets and Lies, the unvarnished truth about adoption. Because so many people
Yes.
have approached me now after reading my book, my neighbor here in Coral Springs, another neighbor in another state, and have told me amazing stories about their adoption and what happened, and some of them adopted children as well. The stories are just amazing, and all the lies and secrets surrounding those adoptions.
Yes, and yeah, it's really good. Your book's really good, and we do really appreciate you coming on. We're going to wind down here as we're getting close to that 8 o'clock hour, so we can open it up to questions from our attendees. So I'm going to go ahead. I've got a few more minutes, but I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording, pause the recording right now. Okay.